What's up, guys? Brady Figueroa coming at you with a review for the new A Day to Remember record, Big Ole Album Volume 1, released, I guess, technically like a month ago, but released digitally on streaming services today, Friday, March 21st. I've been really excited for this album. I like how they kind of just surprise released it physically. One, just because it gave people a reason to get some physical albums again, which I very much respect, but also just because it kind of caught me by surprise, and just the fact that we had this extra month before it hit streaming services kind of allowed more anticipation to build. And I've also just always enjoyed this band's music. I just uploaded that A Day to Remember discography ranking, so if you enjoy this review, you'd like to hear more extended thoughts on their catalog as a whole and just kind of see where I'm coming from in this review, definitely check out that discography ranking. And if you want to see more rock and metal-related content and album reviews, discography rankings, definitely hit the subscribe button. So yeah, let's get into it. It's the band's 8th album now. It follows up 2021's You're Welcome, which, not to spoil anything from that discography ranking, but I'm with the majority on this one in a sense that was, let's just say, not their best album. For my taste, that album was just way too bland and pop-pandering and just saw them ultimately losing their identity, which is something I never want to hear from a band that I enjoy. I'm all for bands pushing their sound forward and trying new things and experimenting, but it's got to be good. And evidently, I'm not the only one who thinks that, and I think even the band is aware of that. And, like, even Bad Vibrations, the album before that one, which I personally enjoyed for the most part, opinions are pretty divided and fractured on that too. So having 12 years without like a rock solid album that all the fans seem to enjoy, that's a lot of pressure for these guys. And for me, going into the album, I really had no idea what to expect, and the singles leading up to the album didn't really help with that either. They put out Miracle as the first single like way back almost 3 years ago in the summer of 2022, which is a song that I did enjoy quite a bit, just because as opposed to the majority of the songs on You're Welcome, Miracle felt like an actual evolution for the band's sound. Like, it still sounded like A Day to Remember, but it was clearly a much more modern rendition of it. So it was great to hear that at the time, and I still like the song now. But then going into this album, the second single that dropped last year, Feedback, really don't like that song at all, even still. When that song came out, that was back when I was doing like these song reactions where I would just like record myself actually listening to the song like in the background on my computer here because I don't have all like the fancy software for it. But I remember giving my final thoughts about the song at the end of the video after my first time hearing it and saying something along the lines of like, if the album sounds like this, they're headed for a career low. And I still stand by that and just as far as if the whole album was in the exact style as Feedback, I do think that would be a career low. But luckily, it's not. They did release the two final singles on, I guess, release day, physical release day, Make It Make Sense and LeBron. I did track reviews for both of them. Make It Make Sense didn't really hook me that much. I wasn't really into that song. I just thought the riffing and guitar style were kind of boring, and the chorus was just really like something out of like the Octane falling in reverse type playbook. Didn't really resonate with me. But I did enjoy the track LeBron quite a bit. That track, again, sounded like a much more modern rendition of A Day to Remember's signature style of pop punk. It's straight to the point, it's hooky, it's catchy, it's pretty much everything you could ask for in this style of A Day to Remember's music when they go for more just that straightforward, pure pop punk sound. And kind of going off of that and going into the full album now, I have to say, and it makes me really happy to say, that as far as the pop punk tracks on here, they are back. The pop punk tracks on here are all super fun and infectious and catchy and hooky. They really remind me of kind of, again, like a modern rendition of A Day to Remember's best pop punk style songs, which for my money would be on What Separates Me From You and Common Courtesy. The songs on here like Flowers, All My Friends, Closer Than You Think, LeBron also, feel like a logical progression from the tracks on those albums. And this is especially a compliment for me, considering like I'm not like the biggest pop punk fan, but A Day to Remember's always executed that style really well for my money, not just because they blend it with metal, but just the fact that just how they execute it. And I'm really enjoying all of those songs that I just mentioned on here, which pretty much are full-on modern A Day to Remember pop punk tracks. My favorite has got to be Flowers. It has some genuinely heartwarming and moving lyrics, which I think we can all relate to. It also has some just very warm and inviting chord progressions. And listen, I've never really enjoyed the term easycore as far as labeling this band, because I've always just seen easycore as pop punk with breakdowns, And A Day to Remember is just so much more than that. But I will admit that despite that, this song does fit pretty snugly in that description, because it pretty much is just that, like a pop punk track with a breakdown that kind of comes out of nowhere, but it just grooves so hard that it works. Like the transitions between those parts just feel so smooth and cohesive, which is something that even on my favorite A Day to Remember albums has been somewhat of I don't want to say an issue or a criticism, because I still love those albums, but something I notice. And when using the word fun to describe a song, especially a pop punk track, I could not think of a better song than All My Friends to have that adjective smacked on it. Because it is just that. It has this amazing element of nostalgia that I can especially relate to. Just being a guy in my 20s, I listen to this song and I can't help but imagining myself going out with my friends. And let's be honest, does it ever really feel like in A Day to Remember album if Jeremy doesn't at some point sing about his friends? And I also really dig Closer Than You Think, which is also the closing track on the album. It just, again, it's one of those songs where the chord progressions are just so heartwarming and emotional and happy and cheerful sounding. You can't help but listen to the song and smile. And Jeremy's kind of isolated vocals at the end of the song with just some kind of fading sound effects in the background is such an amazing way to end this album. So yeah, as far as the pop punk stuff on here, this album honestly gets an A+. I have no complaints about any of those songs. Now, as far as the rest of the stuff goes, the more rock, metal, hardcore, metalcore stuff that's all kind of blended on here, I gotta be honest, it's a little spotty. Like, just the opening array of tracks alone, I mean, you got Make It Make Sense, which I've already talked about. Then you got Feedback, which I've already talked about very negatively. And then the third track, Bad Blood, I'm not really into that either. It's not like a bad song. Like, I'd put it kind of on the same level as Make It Make Sense probably, but I have a lot of the same criticisms for this song as I do for the first two tracks. Like, it starts with the whoa-whoa vocals, and then just the song overall from there just feels really, really like radio rock. Very much in that same vein as Make It Make Sense and Feedback. There is the bridge section with those harmonized guitar licks, and then that breakdown with like those droning sound effects in the background. That at least kind of spice things up a little bit, but for me, it's not enough. I also really don't like the track Die For Me. It was co-written along with Ali Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon, which I could very much hear that. I'm not a Bring Me the Horizon hater. I'll get that out there right now. But this song is just, it's so like their last few albums. Definitely the most fully fledged pop-esque song on this album, which is probably something else that kind of turns me off from it. But just compared to the other tracks on here, whether it's the more fun and infectious pop-punk tracks or the metal-esque songs that I really enjoy that I'll get into, this song just ends up kind of boring me. And there's some kind of corny lyrics about shitting daisies, so that was a little off-putting too. So yeah, as you can see, there were quite a few songs that I really wasn't into on this album, but it was nice that at least 3 of them were right off of the bat, so I can at least get through those or skip through those and enjoy the rest of the album all the way through, maybe with the exception of Die For Me. To the Death, though, is a pretty decent song. It's kind of got, again, like a droning opening riff and a more, like, dark, dramatic chorus that I think is cool. Very much like a middle ground track on here for me. Like, it's definitely a lot better than the songs I don't like, but it doesn't really live up to the other songs on here that I'm really enjoying. And another thing, sequencing-wise, that I love about this album is that after you get past Die For Me, the album closes on a fucking bang with some of the best songs of the album, like, all in sequence to end the album. Track Same Team has this kind of subdued intro that explodes into this really cool, like, again, kind of dark and dramatic chorus. One of my favorite choruses on the album. And then after that, it explodes into one of my favorite breakdown type riffs on the album that almost goes into some Jet territory. There's that nasty pinch harmonic in there. This song has some of the best up and down dynamics on the album. And this is another track that does feel like definitely a more modern rendition of A Day to Remember's formula. So I'm really enjoying that track, but even that track pales in comparison to, without question, my favorite track on here, which is Silence. Talk about up and down dynamics. Like, the way this song starts with that, like, ominous, lurking and tension building, clean guitar driven part, it's really doomy. And then Jeremy's vocals come in and they sound really like, they sound subdued, but they still really feel like they're building tension. And guys, when that first chorus hit the first time I heard this song, my jaw was on the fucking floor. 11 tracks into this album, they just decided to go full-on fucking Gojira out of absolutely nowhere. It's fucking awesome, but it's like the biggest, like, out-of-left-field moment on the entire record. But, like, oh god, those stomping drums and those groaning guitars in the background that just sound so, like, bendy. The harmonized and synced up different vocal styles that make Jeremy's vocals sound really, really echoey. He really does sound almost identical to Joe Duplantier. Like, if you told me that chorus actually had Joe singing on it, I would believe it. And again, just the up and down dynamics it has, because after that, it drops back into that doomy clean guitar part. It's such an awesome contrast. And then for the breakdown, we do get more kind of somewhat more familiar sounding A Day to Remember style screams, but those Gojira influences are still kind of there, just in the way those guitars just groan. This is an excellent example of stylistic experimentation gone extremely well. This song is a knock out of the park for A Day to Remember. So yeah, honestly, with this album as a whole, I'm pleasantly surprised for a number of different reasons. And even though there were a few songs that I wasn't really into, for the most part, I'm enjoying more of the songs on here than I'm not. I gotta say, stylistically though, like, I don't know what happened to their breakdowns. Don't get me wrong, like, they hit because they're produced very well. But, like, aside from Miracle and, like I said, that kind of first post-chorus section on Same Team that gets a little genty, the breakdowns on this album are just, they're all really mid-tempo. They're a bit more caveman, which some of that is fine, but for me, it's got to be contrasted with some breakdowns that have a bit more energy to them. And aside from the two examples I gave, all of the breakdowns on here kind of fit in one similar mold. I don't know if Alex Schoenlet on here just didn't want to use as much double bass, but either way, like, the breakdowns, I gotta be honest, kind of left me wanting more. But production-wise, I think the instruments on here sound fucking awesome. It's the production in particular that makes these breakdowns hit really hard, because I do think if they were produced just kind of less or underproduced a bit more, like kind of the style that was on their earlier records, I don't think these breakdowns would have hit as hard as they do. So the instruments sound fantastic. But I'm not really a fan of the overly synthesized vocal production on Jeremy McKinnon's vocals. Like on Make It Make Sense in those verses when he sounds really staticky. Feedback is the worst example of this. And not just because of how goofy those vocal melodies are in the verses, but just from a production standpoint, they sound so, it's almost like he's singing through a filter or with a mask on. And it sucks because his performance on this record is really, really good. There's several moments on here where I feel like his vocals are a bit too processed and overproduced. It doesn't end up being like a huge deal breaker for me because, fortunately enough, I don't know. the songs where it does stick out to me the most, the vocal production, are also the songs that are just the weakest tracks on here. So I don't really find myself listening to them anyways. So I guess rather than making good songs bad, it just makes the already bad songs a lot worse, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, overall, I'm definitely very pleasantly surprised with this album. I really did not have the highest of hopes going into it, but there's a lot to love on here. This is definitely a massive, massive step up from You're Welcome. Probably a slight step up from Bad Vibrations. So if you watch my discography ranking that I just did, you'll kind of be able to place this album in there just based on that. And as a big fan of this band, it was amazing to hear them take a pretty significant step in the right direction. Because even with some songs that I'm not crazy about on here, they sound like them again. This sounds like an A Day to Remember album, which is something I can't really say about You're Welcome. This album gets a 20 out of 30 for me. As always, thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, if you want to see more rock and roll content, definitely hit the subscribe button. If you've heard this album, comment your thoughts on it below. I also have my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.